Finding piano music is easy, but what about finding music for sight reading? How do you go about choosing music for sight reading? And how do you know if a piece of music is at the right level for you? Hi guys, I'm Manu from Piano Sight Reading, where I give sight reading tips to pianists. And in this video, I'm going to give you 9 things to look out for when choosing music for sight reading. So probably one of the most important things to look out for is the rhythm. So scan the music and have a look at how vertically aligned the music is. Is it pretty straightforward with, just crotchets and quavers? Do you have a lot of syncopation or polyrhythms? And what about the note values? Do they keep on changing? Maybe from triplets to quavers to dotted rhythm. So have a look and see how straightforward the rhythm looks. Another thing to look out for is the density of the music. How dense is the music? Is every beat made up of many notes with chords and arpeggios, or is it relatively thin with maybe one note per beat in each hand? And are the beats mainly made up of crotchets and quavers, or do you have a lot of semi-quavers and demi-semi-quavers? Also look at the texture. So is the piece made up of a melody and an accompaniment, or is it mainly made up of counter melodies? In other words, is it contrapuntal like the music of Bach? And if it is contrapuntal, how many voices does it have? And just keep in mind that the more voices you have, the harder it's going to be to read. Also have a look at the tonality. So by that I mean have a look at the key signature. While it's not necessarily harder to play something with many sharps or flats, it makes it much harder to sight read. So have a look at the key signature. Also look at whether it's predictable, as in, is it in a major or minor key, or is it made up of modes? And what about accidentals? Is the piece littered in accidentals, or is it fairly straightforward? Now the structure is another thing to look for. So is the piece made up of sections that repeat? Like, is it in ternary form, for example? Does it have the structure A, B, A? Or is everything different? And what about repetitions? Do you have any repeated patterns in the bass, or any repeated chord progressions? If you can spot these, that means it's going to be easier to sight read. The more repetitions you have, the easier it should be. Also have a look at the range of notes. Are the notes within a 5-finger position, or do they go beyond that? And if they do, are there any leaps? Like, does it move from one register to another, or does it stay fairly consistent in one part of the piano? The wider the range, the harder it's going to be to sight read. Also take note of the articulation. So have a look at whether there are lots of slurs, whether there are any staccato notes, and most importantly, whether the hands do different things. Say you have slurs in one hand but staccato notes in another, that can be hard to play. Not so much to read, but to play. So watch out for that. Also have a look at how much detail you have in the piece. Does it have a lot of ornaments and trills and runs like in a piece by Chopin, or is it fairly straightforward with no ornaments whatsoever. And lastly, ask yourself how familiar you are with the style of the piece. If it's something like a waltz, have you played waltzes before? Because if you have, then it makes it easier to sight read a waltz. Or if it's a jazz piece, have you played jazz before? Because if you haven't, then it's going to be harder to work out how to read it and what to expect. Now, something that you don't need to take account of is the tempo. So if you see presto or allegro at the top of the piece, you don't need to worry about that, because the aim is not necessarily to be able to play a piece up to tempo. You can get just as much benefits sight reading a fast piece at a slower tempo than sight reading slow pieces. So I wouldn't worry too much about the tempo of the piece. So those were the 9 things to look out for when choosing a piece of music for sight reading. So next time you go and search for music, think of these elements that I mentioned in this video. And if for any reason you still have trouble knowing what to pick, then I suggest you go for graded repertoire books. There are many available out there. There's a few that I've got listed in the description below if you need inspiration there. But otherwise, just search for graded books, graded repertoire books, and go from there, because then you have an idea of the level you can expect. Well, I hope you found this video useful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy sight reading!